The air was hot and still when the lions closed in, their golden eyes fixed on the trembling baby elephant. She was alone. No herd. No mother. Just soft whimpers and hopelessness in her wide, frightened eyes. But just when it seemed all was lost, thunder rumbled not from the sky, but from the forest. Dust swirled gently around the feet of a small, lost creature. Her name would later be known as Nia, meaning purpose in Swahili, but right now she had none. No direction. No safety. Only fear. Nia was barely a year old, still with the stubbly fuzz of youth on her head and knees too big for her gangly legs. She had wandered too far from the herd during a thunderstorm the night before. She hadn't meant to. One wrong step, one distraction, and the shadows swallowed her. When morning came, the sounds of her family were gone. Instead, there was silence, and then there were the lions. The pride had spotted her just after sunrise. 7 of them. Their leader, a bulky male with a dark mane and a long scar across his nose, slinked forward with measured, patient steps. The females fanned out silently, forming a semicircle. They knew exactly what they were doing. And Nia? She didn't know how to fight. She didn't even know how to run in a straight line. Her trunk flailed and her small ears fluttered as she let out a squeaky, desperate trumpet. It didn't echo with power. It cracked like a broken plea. The lions closed in. One lioness crouched low, tail twitching. Another mirrored her on the right. Nia backed up into a fallen branch and tumbled awkwardly. She was trapped. High above, hidden by the canopy, a pair of eyes watched. Sharp eyes. Ancient. Intelligent. Silent. They had seen this before, and they didn't like it. In the branches of a giant baobab, an old mandrill named Jabari sat still as stone. He was no ordinary monkey. No chatter, no antics. His face was weathered with time, his beard streaked with white, and his eyes held a wild wisdom. Jabari had seen the little elephant's kind suffer before. He had watched poachers tear families apart. He had seen predators circle the weak. But something in this baby's spirit stirred him. She didn't run away, she stood trembling but stood nonetheless. And then she called. A single, strangled trumpet burst from her tiny lungs. It wasn't loud. It wasn't powerful. But it was honest, and it was heard. Deep within the bush, a faint rustling began. It was subtle like wind through tall grass. But it grew louder. More frantic. The lions paused. The lead male raised his head, sniffed the air. Something was coming. Jabari leapt down from the tree, landing with surprising grace for someone so old. He moved fast, swinging through branches, shrieking a warning across the canopy. Kree-ka! Kree-ka! His alarm echoed through the trees. To any predator in the area, that call meant danger. And then the ground shook. The lions turned their heads. Confused. A low rumble, like a faraway drumbeat, began to rise from the earth. Dust lifted from the savanna as something big approached. Suddenly, a gray blur burst from the bush. Not one elephant. 4. A matriarch led the charge. Massive tusks, ears flared, eyes wild with fury. Behind her were 2 more females and a young bull, barely out of adolescence but already taller than the Lion King himself. The matriarch let out a deafening trumpet, one that made the air vibrate. The lions didn't wait for a second warning. They scattered like leaves in the wind. Even the scar-faced male, proud as he was, knew this wasn't his battle. He backed away, teeth bared, then vanished into the tall grass with the others. The baby elephant, Nia, stood frozen. The big matriarch thundered to a halt before her, trunk raised. She sniffed the air, then touched Nia's head gently. Her gaze was sharp, but soft. Nia trembled, blinking up at the enormous figure before her. And then the matriarch did something no one expected. She knelt. Lowered herself slightly, an ancient gesture of welcome. Jabari, watching from a branch, smiled softly. This wasn't just a rescue. This was adoption. The other elephants moved in, brushing Nia with their trunks, surrounding her with a protective circle. Their massive bodies stood like a fortress between her and the wild. Nia let out a sigh that almost sounded like a sob. She was no longer alone. But this was only the beginning. Who was this matriarch that risked her herd to save a stranger's calf? And what bond would form between Nia and the elephants that adopted her? The herd was moving again, slow and deliberate, with Nia carefully sheltered in the center. The baby elephant's tiny feet patted against the dry earth, still shaking from the adrenaline, but safer now than she had been in hours. Her new guardians, the massive matriarch and 3 others, surrounded her like shadows, never letting her fall behind. But high above them, floating silently, was a drone. And behind that drone was a man who couldn't believe what he was seeing. Ranger Elias Gathagi had been watching the scene unfold from a hidden outpost 3 miles north. He wasn't supposed to be there. His job was to track known rogue lions that had been stalking nearby villages. But when the drone camera picked up the isolated calf early that morning, his instincts pulled him off course. Elias had worked in the reserve for 16 years. He'd seen orphan calves before. And usually, they didn't make it. The wild was merciless. But this calf was different. She fought to stand her ground. She called when most would hide. And now, somehow, she'd been embraced by a herd that wasn't hers. Elias squinted at the matriarch on his monitor, adjusting the drone's zoom. The angle sharpened. The matriarch's face came into crisp detail. And that's when his heart stopped. That can't be, Elias whispered. He leaned closer, almost trembling. Around the base of the matriarch's right tusk was a faint, jagged scar. Not from a fight, but from a shackle. Years ago. Her name was Mama Tembo. Elias bolted up from his seat, knocking over a water bottle as he scrambled for his field notes. He pulled out a battered file folder and flipped through pages until he found it, a yellowed photo taken nearly a decade ago. There she was. Mama Tembo. Captured during a brutal poaching raid, chained for days until Elias and his team intervened. Back then she had a calf. But the poachers got to it first. The mother had mourned in silence, refusing to eat for days after her rescue. And when she finally returned to the wild, she disappeared. Until now. Elias watched the matriarch nudge Nia forward gently with her trunk. Not with dominance. Not with distance. But with maternal warmth. Like she knew what this calf needed, because she had once needed the same thing. She's not just helping, Elias murmured. She's healing. The forest seemed to respond to the revelation. The wind picked up, brushing through the tall acacia trees. The drone buzzed quietly, keeping its respectful distance. Nia walked closer to Mama Tembo's side, bumping into her leg and glancing up as if waiting for approval. The older elephant paused, then rested her trunk gently on Nia's back. A mother's blessing. But the reunion stirred something deeper in Elias. His hands hovered over his radio. There were protocols for cases like this. Tag the calf, report the herd change, consider relocating the orphan for its safety. But Elias hesitated. Because Nia wasn't just safe. She was chosen. Mama Tembo hadn't just taken her in out of instinct. She'd remembered. That scar, that loss, that absence of a calf at her side for years, was now filled. He didn't have the heart to intervene. Instead, he grabbed a field notebook and began scribbling down notes furiously. Day 1, unbelievable integration. Lone calf identified as orphaned, approximate 10 to 12 months. Herd appears unrelated but shows full protective behavior. Matriarch identified as Mama Tembo. Psychological projection? Maternal transfer? Or something else? Elias looked up at the screen again. The drone followed at a high elevation, recording but never interfering. He zoomed in on Nia. Her eyes were more alert now, still wide but no longer shaking. She was safe. He switched off the monitor and stood, walking outside the canvas shelter into the golden light of early evening. Birds chirped nearby. He could still feel the tremble of the earth from the elephant's earlier charge. And then his radio crackled. Station 4, this is Station 2. Copy? Elias clicked the transmitter. Go ahead. Lions just crossed into your quadrant again. 7 total. They were headed south but doubled back near the Kulu River. Elias's face hardened. That was close. Too close. The pride hadn't given up. His jaw clenched. He had one more duty tonight, to make sure they didn't come back. Meanwhile, in the fading daylight beneath the trees, Nia stumbled on a root and squealed. The youngest of the herd, a juvenile bull with playful energy and long, wobbly tusks, turned and gently helped her back to her feet. It was the first time Nia made a sound that wasn't fear. A little grunt. Soft. Curious. The herd paused near a waterhole. Mama Tembo led the way, dipping her trunk to splash the surface, encouraging Nia to mimic her. The calf tried clumsily, drawing a pathetic stream before sneezing it all out. The others chirped with soft rumbles of amusement. Jabari, still watching from the trees, grunted and nodded with satisfaction. This little one might just survive after all. But the lions weren't the only ones lurking nearby. Farther back in the trees, past where the elephants had left their trail, a camera trap clicked. A hidden lens. A red blink. A faint rustle. And a boot print. Someone else was tracking the herd. And they weren't a ranger. In the fading warmth of dusk, the air grew thick with the scent of dust, wild grass and something else, danger. While Nia lay tucked between the bodies of her new herd, Gently snoring beneath Mama Tembo's belly, something moved through the darkness with a predator's patience. Boots pressed silently into soft earth, careful not to snap even a twig. The man was tall, broad-shouldered, draped in camouflage faded by years of sun and secrets. He crouched near the recently trampled edge of the trail and touched the dirt, feeling the lingering warmth of massive feet. His lips curled into a smirk. "There you are," he whispered. "Didn't expect to find you with her." The man's name was Dalton Ridge. A former ranger turned mercenary tracker, someone who knew how to vanish in the wild and how to make others disappear. He had once protected the animals of this reserve just like Elias. But now he worked for whoever paid the most. And this job? It wasn't just about elephants. It was about one elephant calf. Nia. Because somewhere, a man with cold eyes and deeper pockets believed that the calf Elias had seen on that drone feed wasn't just a lucky orphan. He believed she was the last living bloodline of a matriarchal line hunted to extinction for the secrets they were rumored to carry. Memory, migration, and gold. Some tribes spoke of an ancient path known only to elephants, a forgotten burial ground of kings, loaded with treasures lost to time. And the belief? Only the direct descendants of the oldest matriarch lines could still find it. Dalton didn't believe in legends. But he believed in orders. And the bounty on Nia was enough to fund 5 lifetimes. Back at Ranger HQ, Elias was busy combing through old logs. The photo of Mama Tembo sat beside his laptop, where he had opened drone footage frame by frame. He zoomed in on Nia's back again just above her shoulder blade. There it was. A barely visible mark. Faint, faded, but unmistakable. A birthmark. His breath caught. Elias reached for a leather-bound field journal buried under years of maps. Inside was a record from 8 years ago, when poachers ambushed a protected herd and killed the leading female, a matriarch named Zahara. Only one calf had been seen at the scene, and it was taken by the poachers before reinforcements arrived. No one had ever found the body. That calf had been marked, an unusual swirl of skin pigmentation near the shoulder. Just like Nia. She's Zahara's daughter, Elias whispered. That means... He froze. If he had found this, someone else could too. He stood and grabbed his rifle and binoculars. He needed to get to Mama Tembo's herd. Fast. The moon had climbed high when the wind shifted. Mama Tembo, sleeping lightly with one eye open, suddenly rose. Her trunk lifted, testing the air. A scent she hadn't smelled in years returned, human, but wrong. Not Elias. Not safety. A soft rumble escaped her chest. The rest of the herd stirred, moving in sync without a word. Nia, confused, blinked up groggily as she was nudged to her feet. The elephants began moving. Dalton saw them first, their silhouettes shifting through the trees like shadows. He reached into his satchel and pulled out a device, a small dart gun, laced with tranquilizer strong enough for a full-grown bull. He only needed one shot. He waited. They crossed the riverbed, headed toward the plateau. He followed silently. But the herd moved faster than he expected. More purposeful. Like they knew. Nia stumbled once but was quickly lifted by a tusk. She was struggling to keep up. Her ears flapped in confusion, her tiny trunk curled in panic. Mama Tembo pressed her closer, urging her forward. They were heading for high ground. But Dalton was closing in. He crouched behind a boulder, raising the dart gun. He had a clear shot. He slowed his breathing. Finger on the trigger. And just as he pulled, crack, a warning shot rang out. Dalton ducked instinctively as a bullet hit the dirt inches from his boot. Up on the ridge, silhouetted by moonlight, stood Elias. Rifle raised. Eyes locked. Drop the weapon, Dalton. Elias shouted, voice echoing across the valley. Dalton cursed and rolled for cover, diving behind a tree. You always did have good timing, Githagi. You always did stink of betrayal, Elias snapped, sliding down the ridge with practiced precision. He stopped 10 feet from the boulder, rifle still aimed. You're not taking that calf. Dalton slowly stood, hands raised but eyes burning. She's not just a calf, Elias. She's the key. Don't pretend you haven't read the legends. Don't pretend you don't wonder. I don't wonder, Elias growled. I protect. They stared each other down, silence broken only by the wind and the distant trumpets of a retreating herd. Then in a heartbeat Dalton lunged. But Elias was faster. The butt of the rifle cracked against Dalton's shoulder, sending him sprawling. Before he could reach for a knife, Elias had him pinned, arms locked tight. You come back here, Elias hissed, and I won't miss next time. Dalton spat blood and grinned. She'll be hunted, Elias. Doesn't matter if it's me or the next guy. You saw the mark. The stories are real. And they'll never stop coming. Elias's eyes darkened. Then I'll make sure she's somewhere no one will ever find her. Far above, Mama Tembo paused on the ridge. The rest of the herd moved ahead, but she turned and looked back. Her trunk raised high. A signal. A goodbye. Elias looked up in time to see her silhouette vanish behind the trees. Nia was safe for now. But the whispers of the past had awakened. And in the wild, whispers become storms. Elias stood still as the echo of Mama Tembo's trumpet faded into the night, swallowed by the ancient hills ahead. He watched the silhouettes of the herd slip like ghosts into the mist-draped valley, vanishing with every step. The baby elephant, Nia, was somewhere in that moving tide of giants tucked beneath wrinkled legs, guarded like a living treasure. Dalton groaned behind him, still cuffed and slumped against the tree trunk Elias had dragged him to. "You let them go," Dalton rasped. "She's walking into the forgotten vale." Elias didn't answer at first. His eyes were still fixed on the ridge line where Nia had last stood. The moon cast silver streaks across the land, making the whole scene look like a dream half remembered. "No one's dared enter that valley in 50 years, Dalton continued. "You think that herd's just migrating? You think this is normal?" He laughed bitterly. "You saw the mark on her. She's not just a calf. She's Zahara's blood. That herd knows exactly where they're going. And when they get there..." Elias turned slowly, eyes hard. "That's why I let them go." Dalton blinked, caught off guard. "What?" Elias crouched in front of him, his voice low but steady. "All my life I've been tracking migrations, protecting wildlife, saving what's left of something ancient and sacred. And in all that time I thought I was the guardian." He stood again, rifle slung across his shoulder. "But I was wrong. She is." The Forgotten Vale was a place of legend. Older rangers whispered about it during storms when the radios died and the winds howled like spirits. Locals said elephants once led the kings of old to secret sanctuaries filled with riches. Not gold or gems, but wisdom. Bones of ancestors, sacred burial mounds, watering holes that never ran dry, no matter the drought. But the path had been lost until tonight. Mama Tembo's herd was walking a trail passed down not by maps, but memory. And now Nia was part of it. 2 days later, Elias was back at HQ. He hadn't slept much. The drone footage showed nothing beyond the ridgeline. No heat signatures. No movement. It was as if the elephants had stepped into another world. He stood before the reserve board, a room full of officers, conservationists, and skeptics. "You let the calf go," one man barked. "You had a poacher in custody. You had data. You could have tranquilized the herd, brought them in for observation." Elias stood firm, jaw set. They weren't just a herd. They were protecting a legacy. "From what?" a woman asked. "From science? From preservation? We've lost too many bloodlines already." Elias shook his head slowly. "You didn't see what I saw. That calf didn't just survive. She connected. That matriarch, Mama Tembo, she chose her. Not randomly. Deliberately. Like she knew what Nia carried. Not just genetics. Knowledge." The room fell silent. "Let me guess," said another official flatly. "You're saying the legends are real." Elias met his gaze without flinching. "I'm saying they're not legends anymore." That night, Elias returned to the field station and reopened his old notes. He flipped through a weathered page and found a field sketch from 8 years ago, Zahara, tall and proud, with her calf at her side. He looked closely now. There it was, the mark on her calf's shoulder. He hadn't noticed it back then. It was fate that brought Nia back now. Suddenly his radio crackled to life. "Elias, it's Samira from the East Post. You better come see this." Hours later, Elias stood on a rocky overlook east of the reserve's edge. Samira, a young ranger, handed him binoculars and pointed toward the distant horizon. He peered through them, and froze. Far in the distance, etched faintly into the landscape where no maps marked a trail, was a shape, an elephant footprint. Not just any, but huge, like it had been burned into the earth itself. Around it, faint pathways branched out like veins in a leaf. More elephants had followed. The paths shimmered in the rising heat of dawn, and at their heart, a foggy outline of a hidden valley, shielded by cliffs and impossible to reach by vehicle or drone. They were gone. Hidden. But alive. Nia had made it. Elsewhere in that sacred place, Nia was changing. Her steps were steadier now. She was growing bolder. She played with the young bulls and splashed in the hidden pools. But what marked her most was her memory. She began walking to certain ancient trees and pausing. She would touch the bark with her trunk and hold it there, just like Zahara once had. She walked slowly across old dry creek beds and would suddenly trumpet in joy when she found a buried water source. The other elephants watched her. They began to follow. Mama Tembo didn't lead anymore. She walked beside Nia now. It was as if the past had returned through her. And then one morning, Nia stood before a rocky altar, a place of bones and broken tusks, where the wind never blew too loud. She placed her trunk to the earth and stayed that way for minutes. Silent. Listening. And then she rumbled, not as a calf, but as something more. Back at the reserve, Elias returned to Dalton's holding cell. "You were right about one thing," he said as he leaned on the bars. "She will be hunted. And maybe we can't stop them all. But we can make it harder." He placed a folder on the desk outside. "We're expanding the boundaries, locking down the region. And we're letting the story spread." Dalton blinked. "What story?" "That the calf died in a lion attack." Dalton frowned. "But she didn't." Elias gave a quiet smile. "That's the point." And so, the world believed the orphaned calf had perished. No one searched. No drones. No poachers. Just silence. But in the wild, where myth breathes beneath every root, Nia lived. She grew. And one day she would return, not just as a survivor but as the leader of legends. If this story left your heart racing and your spirit lifted, don't forget to subscribe to Lion's Shield. Every day, real animals overcome impossible odds, and every story deserves to be told. Let's keep their legacy alive, together.